And welcome to another edition of Battleground Florida. I am Christopher Heath, coming to you from the Parish Healthcare Podcast Studio here at normally I say sunny Orlando, Florida. It is overcast today and a little cold, a hazy shade of winter, if you will. All right, so we are discussing today with an expert in all things gambling, gaming, and just pretty much everything in that realm. Attorney Daniel Wallach. He is calling us from South Florida, and let me first lay it out there. Listen, there are a few people out there who really know gambling, gaming, and how all of this plays out. You are one of them, a real expert in the field. Great to have you on, Daniel.
Yeah, thanks for that wonderful introduction, Christopher. I appreciate it. I've been focusing on the gaming industry, and in particular sports gambling and fantasy sports for pretty much close to the last 10 years. And now, before, a decade ago, it was mostly illegal. And now look at where we are today.
So where are we today?
Well, the U.S. Supreme Court in a landmark decision a year and a half ago overturned the federal law which prevented states from authorizing sports gambling. I mean, that's why Las Vegas had always been the sports gambling capital of the world, because it was capital of the United States, in as much as it was the only state in the U.S. where you can lawfully place wagers on single game sporting events. But as a result of the Supreme Court's decision, a number of states have now moved quickly to try to emulate Las Vegas, and we've gone from one state where it's legal to now 20 plus the District of Columbia, and I think as many as 40 states have introduced bills to authorize and regulate true sports gambling. 20 states have passed, and I think there are a number of other states that are going to be considering legalization this year, among them Florida, California, Ohio. So we're 20 now, and by this time next year, at next year's Super Bowl, it could easily eclipse 30 states. So the gold rush, so to speak, is on.
The first time I met you was 5-6 years ago during the whole DraftKings FanDuel big brouhaha, with everybody looking at that and saying, okay, wait, hold on. Is this sports betting? Is this fantasy sports? Is this a gray area? And it seems like since then, things have really accelerated to the point where we may see in the next couple of years, as you've already pointed out, half a dozen, if not more, states start to move down the road of legalized sports betting.
Yeah, I mean, the question that we were asking in 2015 was, is it a game of skill or is it a game of chance? Is it gambling? Is it not gambling? Today, it doesn't matter because rather what the two companies, DraftKings and FanDuel, did was rather than try to challenge legal authorities and law enforcement over an interpretation of gambling laws, they did the smart thing. They hired lobbyists and went about trying to change the law in a number of states so that their contests would be classified as not gambling. So rather than litigate the issue and have it, end up in the uncertainty of litigation, what the companies did was they blasted their way through 20 to 30 state legislatures and had bills introduced and signed into law. So there's legal clearance for daily fantasy sports pretty much throughout the country. But now with sports betting being a much more important vertical, those companies which used to offer predominantly fantasy sports contests have now quickly pivoted into the realm of sports betting and are the two most successful online sports betting companies in the United States. In New Jersey, by way of example, DraftKings and FanDuel are responsible for 70% of the mobile betting market in that state, which when you think of where they were 5 years ago, teetering on the verge of potential obsolescence, I mean, that is an incredible business case study.
Is sports betting the next great kind of, I guess, hallmark or kind of marker for the betting industry? Because, I mean, when I was a kid, you remember, there was Atlantic City, there was Vegas, and then that was about it. You had some riverboat casinos that popped up, and then the Indian casinos started to get more prolific, and it seems as if sports betting is always been that thing that's just a little bit too far for even all of those casinos. Is that the next big thing?
It is, and I'll tell you why. It's not necessarily a significant game changer from a revenue perspective, but it does have a couple of attributes that are especially attractive for gaming operators. It has a millennial audience. It has a sports enthusiast audience. which have long been beyond the reach of the traditional casino industry. If you walk into a casino 5 years ago, the demographic is considerably older, or to the extent that it is younger, they're going there to party and go to nightclubs. Sports betting and daily fantasy sports open up the sort of the floodgates for all these new potential customers that could be integrated into a casino or in a gaming setting. So for some of the gaming operators, this is sort of the next frontier. And, just as we've seen horse racing sort of decline over the years because as the demographic ages, and they're having difficulty bringing in younger players, younger gamblers, sports betting is the antidote for that, because the level of sports obsession and enthusiasm in this country, there's no other pastime that can even rival that. So what legalized sports betting can do is attract more visitation to the casinos, to the racetracks, tribal casinos, and even in the online setting, these online casinos could open up other opportunities to play poker, online slot machines. The number of opportunities for growing a gaming operator's profit margin are unlimited here because of the influx of new signups as a result of legal sports betting. This is the most desirable demographic in the industry, 21 to 39.
Listen, I remember when I was in that demographic, that it wasn't all that long ago. And you have two things that I think the gambling industry loves. You have disposable income and not a lot of interest in squirreling away a nest egg for the future. So, putting a sports bet down is not outside the realm of possibility when you're in that age bracket.
Well, it's also young, single, somewhat educated, no children. I mean, as you get a little bit older, the priorities shift somewhat. More and more of your income is devoted towards, building a retirement nest egg, providing for your family. In the younger age group, they want to have fun. Of course, they want to save money, but they work hard. The demands upon, younger people in the workplace today is so different. I mean, longer hours. And while they work hard, they also have some disposable income, and they want to go out. They want to go to the nightclubs, casinos, and increasingly wager online. And that's what's fueled the rise and just runaway success of daily fantasy sports. That age demographic, which will transition over pretty seamlessly into sports betting. In fact, it will be a much larger audience.
Let me ask you to handicap, if you would. What are the odds we see this happen in Florida, and when?
Okay, ever 100%. Okay. As the third most populous state with its 200 million some odd annual tourists and the beaches and warm weather, Florida is poised to be a kingpin of sports betting. It will attract the types of numbers for some of the larger major sporting events like the Super Bowl and NCAA men's basketball tournament that traditionally have flocked to Las Vegas. So while many states don't have the draw of being able to bring tourists from other states for sports gambling, I think the state of Florida could be the one rival to Nevada along those lines. Now, the big question, of course, where would you rather gamble on the Super Bowl? In South Florida in late January, early February, or in Nevada where it could be snowing or it could be 30, 40 degrees. So Florida will definitely make a dent in the junket or the junket, sort of business of traditionally during the big games. Las Vegas attracts several 100,000 unique visitors just to be part of the environment around betting during a game that could be played hundreds or several thousand miles away. And South Florida in particular should be able to cut into that, but it's really the entire state, which from Jacksonville on down, from the Panhandle on down. So that's one of the potential lures and geographic and climate advantages that the state of Florida enjoys. Now, the question of when, I think we're looking at a high likelihood of success during this legislative session because for several reasons. One, the most important reason is that the key players are already talking and working towards a deal. Those are the leaders of the Florida House of Representatives, the Florida Senate, Seminole Tribe of Florida, with some input from Governor DeSantis's office. And when you have the tacit support of the governor of the state, that's usually a very important marker in determining whether a state will be successful in passing a sports betting statute. Earlier this year, Maine's governor vetoed legislation which had been approved by the legislature. 2 years ago, the Michigan governor vetoed legislation. Governor Cuomo in New York has sent signals that he will not support any expanded sports betting. So you need, at a bare minimum, to have some kind of support from the governor's office to have a chance here. And the pace of the conversation and the parties that are involved, and in particular the governor and the Seminole tribe of Florida, I think bode well for the prospects of a bill being successfully introduced and enacted.
I don't know how many people really know the intricacies of Florida's sports betting as it applies to the Seminole tribe. Can you elaborate just a little bit on what exactly, to use a gambling metaphor, what cards is the tribe holding?
The cards they hold are the exclusive rights afforded to them under a contract with the state of Florida, and that contract is known as the Seminole Tribe Gambling Compact, which is an agreement entered into between the state of Florida and the Seminole Tribe of Florida. It was approved by the legislature, signed by the governor in 2010, and that contract guarantees the state of Florida revenue sharing payments from the Seminole Tribe's gambling operations. And in exchange for those revenue payments, which have in recent years have approached $300 million annually, the state has to guarantee the tribe certain exclusivity with respect to gambling. And one of the areas of exclusivity is new games. And if the state of Florida were to authorize a new form of Class 3 gambling, such as sports betting, the tribe would have a justifiable claim to exclusivity over that if it were proposed to be offered statewide. If it were confined to the South Florida pari-mutuels, there are carve-outs in the tribal compact that would allow the state to offer it only to the South Florida racinos without jeopardizing the revenue sharing payments from the Seminole Tribe of Florida. But there's no way that the state will only carve out a portion of the state of Florida for sports betting. So the discussions are going forward on the assumption that the tribe are going to be the hub for sports betting statewide, because any attempt to pass a sports betting law that allows it all over the state would give the tribe cause to suspend their annual payments under the compact. And $300 million is an awful lot of money. And right now the tribe aren't paying any of that because of another breach of the compact, which has nothing to do with sports betting. So one of the motivations in these discussions, one of the catalysts, is the desire to restore or revive the lucrative revenue sharing payments that are approaching $300 million a year. And in order to get there, the tribe will want certain things. And one of the key assets is exclusivity over sports betting at the most, or as a fallback, they would operate as the hub for sports betting and take a revenue share from every other operator's on-site and mobile sports wagering revenues. So they're going to be deeply involved, whether they're the exclusive operator or sort of the partner of all the racetracks, the racinos, high-life frontons, dog tracks, and poker rooms. So the tribe really have to sign off on any kind of proposal for sports betting in order for it to elicit the support of the governor.
And as this would apply to online sports betting, would the online operators have to have some sort of handshake agreement in place with the Seminole tribe to operate in Florida under this?
I don't know how it will be enshrined in the law, whether it's a statute. And in fact, there are so many moving parts here, it's quite possible that the final deal doesn't end up with the tribe operating as the hub. Maybe they receive other benefits, other areas of exclusivity, and sports betting is really kind of an equal footing situation. But it's really looking like the compact will be amended, and the language in the compact will address that situation. So rather than a handshake agreement, it more likely will take the form of a compact amendment, which will have to be legislatively ratified, or a separate piece of legislation, such as a sports wagering bill that sets out all those requirements. None of this is going to be done on a handshake. So if the tribe were to occupy or if the tribe were going to have a prominent role as the hub for sports betting, all the particulars will be spelled out in both the compact and the statute that's approved by the legislature. But one of the bigger questions is, will the legislature be able to authorize it by passing a statute, or will it go to a voter referendum? Remember, a year and a half ago, Amendment 3 was approved by close to 70% of Florida voters, and that measure placed the issue of casino gambling squarely within voter control. So any efforts to authorize casino gambling would have to go exclusively through the voters, and state lawmakers were basically stripped of the ability to expand casino gambling by themselves. And there's a question here as to whether sports betting falls within the ambit of casino gambling. And I don't believe that it does, Chris, because the way that casino gambling is defined in the constitutional amendment is so specific. It requires that that sports betting, if it is to be considered, is to be the type of game that's typically found in casinos nationwide. And at the time of the adoption of Amendment 3, it was in only a few states that had casinos, but the vast majority of states with casino gambling didn't have any sports betting, and it's not even included within the definition of casino gambling in what's known as Amendment 3. So from my vantage point, a vote of the people is not required here, but as a matter of political expediency and trying to avoid some of the pushback from constituents, I think the lawmakers that are behind the push to amend the compact and authorize sports betting would like to see it addressed through a voter referendum, merely or predominantly to avoid political repercussions as well as the threat of litigation by the proponents of Amendment 3. So that might be the path of least resistance.
Well, it would be the path of least resistance, and never discount the ability of the legislature to punt on something that it could do because it's going to be difficult. But it does raise the question of, if the legislature does decide, okay, we're not 100% sure we can do this on our own, let's put it to the voters. What happens if they put it to the voters in the form of an amendment on the ballot and voters don't cross that 60% threshold to approve it, and the legislature still wants to do it? Now you've been told by the voters, we're not 100% sure we're behind this, and you want to still go ahead and do it anyway. It creates almost a more difficult position if the voters don't approve it. It seems like it's the kind of thing that you only stick on the ballot if you know you can break 60% and get it through.
Yeah, and let me raise one other point related to that. You zeroed in on one of the most important salient points in this. The Amendment 3 language doesn't just simply require voter approval. It mandates that it be done through a citizen initiative, meaning the legislature, the House and the Senate can't join together and approve a resolution to place it on the ballot, because that would violate the terms of Amendment 3. Only a citizen initiative, which is a petition by, John Q. Public to put it on the ballot. That is the exclusive mechanism for authorizing casino gambling under Amendment 3. So if the state legislature tried to go the voter referendum route, they would probably still face the same lawsuit challenge from the amendments from the proponents of Amendment 3, because they went about putting it on the ballot the wrong way rather than doing it through a citizen initiative. I mean, it's a poison pill in Amendment 3, basically, which is designed to cut off any ability to realistically approve casino gambling, because the money that's needed, the funding that's needed to do a citizen initiative would run. I mean, you saw what they spent last year on Amendment 3. You need $40-50 million to finance.
You need more than that now. I mean, because they've made it harder in the last legislative session. They made it harder to do citizen initiatives, making it so you can no longer pay per signature. If you're signature gathering, you've got to pay an hourly rate. You have to be in state. You have to register. I mean, the legislature made it significantly harder for citizens to put an initiative out there, which would make this even more of a lift. And when you add to it, every time we turn around, the legislature is also trying to increase that threshold from 60% to 66.6%. because, let's face it, the legislature doesn't like, voters telling them what to do. So, I mean, it does seem like there's nothing but problems down this road.
Yeah.
It almost seems like it's better for the legislature to say, you know what, we're just going to go ahead and approve sports betting through the Seminole Compact, and we'll litigate it out in the courts and deal with that as we have to.
Yeah. Now and I agree 100%. But the issue of amending the Seminole Compact, well, that falls outside the scope of Amendment 3. Amendment 3 expressly provides that compact amendments don't fall within the sweep of the amendment. And
okay.
For obvious reasons, it's in there as an exclusion because the Seminole tribe were one of the big benefactors behind Amendment 3. It's their money. It's their push. This no casino group, John Sawinski, he's basically a front person. Well, I don't know this for a fact, but I think it's widely suspected that initiative was funded almost entirely by the tribe and by Disney.
Yeah, I've done some reporting on that, and yeah, you're right. I mean, that was where the money came from, is the tribe and Disney, which are, needless to say, strange bedfellows, considering Disney is very opposed to gambling, and the Seminole tribe
they're very opposed to having a rival, destination resort casino in South Florida that will siphon the convention business away from Orlando. I mean, they're already involved with gambling indirectly through their ownership of ESPN, and I think media companies are increasingly embracing, gambling, and in particular sports gambling. So I think Disney will eventually join the crowd more directly in having a direct business relationship. So I don't think that they have some moral objection to the growth of sports betting. I think they have a competitive interest, as do the Seminole tribe, to basically maintain their monopoly over over most forms of Class 3 gambling in Florida. So there are some business aspects to this, but there's still the threat of litigation, even if you amend the compact to allow for sports betting, because one of the features of the proposed new law would be that even if the tribe were to act as the hub, the Florida parimutuels, namely the high life frontons, horse racetracks, poker rooms, greyhound, all the tracks, would have to be partners with the Seminole tribe, and the compact would basically require that the servers that process online bets and even some of the remote bets on property at the racetracks would have to tie back into servers placed on casino property. And the proponents of Amendment 3 are going to say, well, that's not a pure compact issue. That's still betting that's taking place off Indian land. And to the extent that all the racetracks offer mobile betting tied to a server on Indian land, that brings it within the scope of Amendment 3, because it's no longer just a pure amendment to the compact. It's a compact amendment plus an entitlement to non-Indian operators to offer sports betting. So I think no matter which way you slice it, the proponents of Amendment 3 are going to find some litigation hook. And I personally don't think that it would be wise for the Florida legislature to go down the route of a ballot initiative, because, as I've written consistently, and most recently for Forbes magazine, there is no legal justification for considering sports betting a form of casino gambling within the scope of Amendment 3. It's the only form of Class 3 gambling that's left out of the definition, and the way that casino gambling is defined is so specific that it couldn't logically include sports betting. So I think if the legislature wants to be consistent and not have a sort of acquiesce to the Amendment 3 crowd by putting it on the ballot, I think the best way to go about authorizing sports betting in Florida is purely legislatively, without a ballot question, because without a citizen-led initiative, the proponents of Amendment 3 are going to cry foul. And this will not be done as a citizen initiative.
You mentioned all the money that is within the compact that is no longer flowing to the state, I should say, and will be if there is a new compact put in place. And to that end, we've seen the budget projections where in the last couple of years we've been running a surplus, and the out years, the upcoming years, 2021, 2022, we're going to have some tight years in Florida's budget. That money from the Seminoles sure would make things a lot easier to give corrections officers pay raises, teachers pay raises, a lot of the things the state wants to do, that it looks out at its long-term budget and says we might not have the money. $300 million plus coming in from the Seminole tribe sure makes those decisions a lot easier.
Yeah, but it's more than just the 300 million. Obviously, that's the main reason. But authorizing sports betting will also make the revenues associated with the parimutuel industry more robust. In fact, independent of tribal gaming, I think the estimates for sports betting in Florida are that it would generate close to $100 million annually in tax revenue, which is about 1/3 of what the Seminoles are paying. So if you combine the restoration of the compact payments plus the authorization of sports betting, which would allow these non-Indian operators to basically boost their revenue stream by being able to offer a new vertical draw on customers. You could be talking a combined economic impact just from direct tax revenues of close to $400 million. Not only that, but there's the indirect economic impact by being able to increase the audience for slot machines and poker and spending on property. So we could be talking just from a tax base alone, an overall economic tax impact of close to $500 million annually, not to mention all the other indirect economic impacts such as growth in tourism, job growth, and essentially boosting the fortunes of a parimutuel industry in Florida that employs thousands of people, tens of thousands of people.
How much is there a concern about cannibalization? Because obviously, if everywhere has a casino, then it's not the draw that it used to be, that you have to go to one specific place to gamble. If everybody has this, does that dilute the pool? Does it lower that down? Do you start to cannibalize the own industry?
No, rising tide lifts all boats. The most successful states that offer sports betting, the most lucrative handles, come from states like Nevada and New Jersey that have a plethora of operators. Let's take New Jersey, which is delivering the top numbers in the industry. There are 16 on-site casinos and racetracks, and each casino is allowed up to 3 online brands. So you're talking about not a saturation, but you're talking about a state that has as many as close to 50 distribution points for sports betting. And what Florida has, to benefit it in terms of growing the industry is the population size, tourism. This will, I think, that there is enough to go around. Every track, every racino, every tribal casino will see an uptick in business and an uptick in revenues. Certainly, it would be more beneficial for one of the tracks or one of the operators to have an exclusive monopoly over sports betting, but I think there's enough to go around for every operator. It would be a shock to me if this hurt any particular property. The extent to which they all do better in revenues, remains to be seen. But it will spike the bottom line and grow the bottom line of every operator in the state of Florida, because there's just too much money to go around. $5 billion in New Jersey in terms of betting handle. I think Florida can approach that and potentially even exceed that.
We obviously have the Super Bowl coming up on Sunday. It's being played down in South Florida, down in Miami. How much money, let's say that this was being played 5-6 years from now and Florida has, in some form or fashion, authorized sports betting. What are we looking at from that game being played in the state of Florida, in a state where sports betting would be allowed?
Okay, 2 years ago, before the Supreme Court decision, the estimated annual handle for Super Bowl betting nationwide was $4 billion. This year, it's estimated to be $6.8 billion. But consider this: if Floridians wanted to legally gamble on this year's Super Bowl, the closest location in the United States that they could go to is Biloxi, Mississippi, which is an 11 to 12-hour car ride. If you bring legal sports betting into the state of Florida by the next Super Bowl game that's played down here, we will go from 6.8 million. Probably to go beyond $9-10 billion easily. It's going to grow every year as more states begin authorizing sports betting. There'll be more overall bets being placed on the Super Bowl legally, so that handle will naturally grow. But you bring in the state of Florida and the several million people who are going to be here at the time of the Super Bowl. I think the handle grows past $10 billion, which is almost 3 times what it was in 2016. So this is just up and away.
I'll wrap up with this. What are the odds we get a new Seminole Compact, and what are the odds that that Seminole Compact at least spells out the next steps for sports betting?
I think we'll know for sure by the end of February, because the session ends March 13th. But I would say it's more likely than not. I think there's a 70 to 80% chance of success here. I think the issues have been narrowed, and as a result of Amendment 3, the state lawmakers aren't focused on bigger things like casinos, and the governor has sent a message that he's not looking for a broad expansion of casino gambling. So by narrowing the focus to sports betting and amending the compact, I think that raises the likelihood of success here. And the recent developments and the news that all the key stakeholders are engaged in discussions and things seem to be moving in the right direction, I think are a positive sign for legalized sports betting. Remember, we almost had a deal at the end of last year's legislative session, but they just ran out of time, and there wasn't sufficient interest in having a special session. Now the efforts have begun anew at prior to the start of the session. So I think there's plenty of time left to cement a deal, and I think we'll see the broad outlines of what that deal looks like within the next couple of weeks. And I am willing to go on record as believing that it's 70 to 80% likely that there'll be a deal struck here.
Yeah, it was one of those things where at the very end of the session, you mentioned this, we saw the lawmakers try and hammer a deal out. And this time around, I mean, they obviously hit the ground running. So there is a little more impetus to try and get something in place. All right, I will wrap up with this since we've talked sports betting for the last half hour and the Super Bowl is coming up. Give me your prediction. Who's got this thing? Are we Chiefs? Are we 49ers? Or do we just hope everybody has fun?
Well, I'll say this for both teams. They will be repeat visitors to the Super Bowl. I mean, Kansas City has a window of opportunity that probably will last for the next 10 to 12 years, given the fact that Patrick Mahomes should be quarterbacking that squad for a long time. And San Francisco has a very young up-and-coming team. So I think we'll be hearing the names Kansas City and San Francisco for many years to come for the big game. But I like Kansas City's chances this year because they came awfully close last year. They're a little bit more seasoned in terms of, knowing what to expect in the playoffs, and the experience that they had last year of coming so close, I think will put them over the top, and Andy Reid will finally win his first Super Bowl and cement his Hall of Fame credentials. But even if he fails, this won't be Andy Reid's last dance for the big game. He'll be back many times with a squad like that, and the Patriots dynasty looking like it's kind of coming to an end.
There you have it, folks. Daniel Wallach with his lock of the week. Take the Chiefs over the 49ers. Daniel, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. We'll definitely keep an eye on whatever they're up to in Tallahassee and see what comes of this, and we will talk again. Thank you for your time, sir.
It's been my pleasure, Chris, and have a wonderful day. Thanks for having me on.
All right, Daniel has moved on to doing other lawyerly things down in South Florida, and I hope you enjoyed the audio there. That was the first time we've used Skype audio, so I thought it sounded pretty good considering, but, we'll see. Anyway, so yes, depending on when this hits your feed, maybe the Super Bowl will be over already. If not, hopefully you've gained some insight there from the very end. Otherwise, we'll keep an eye on sports betting because that definitely seems like that's the next big thing to come out of Tallahassee, and we'll see how long it takes to get that implemented and see what the pushback is from the various parties. But listen, there's a lot of money on the line. And if you don't think the 160 people we send to Tallahassee every year for 60 days to craft our laws aren't interested in a pot of money that is available to them, I've got some bridges I would like to sell you. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for listening. I know in 2019, it was simpler times, and I was able to get 2 of these out every week. We've gotten busier here at Channel 9, and my work covering both the political races, the impeachment, and everything else has tied me up, so I'm not able to get as many of these out as I can. I'm still hoping to do 2 a week. That's my goal. And if I can keep doing that, that's going to make me very happy. But it's a challenge. So I'm working on trying to get 2 a week, and if not, it may just be 1 a week for a while until we can get things sorted out. But I do appreciate everyone for listening. We finally got our numbers back on the show from 2019, and the thing that jumped out at me is how many people listened to the very end of this show, which is alarming. I always figure this little thing here that I do when I wrap up is just me talking into the void, but apparently people listen to this. So thank you for listening all the way to the end. Apple and Stitcher both not only track the downloads, they track how long people listen and if they listen to the entire episode, because obviously advertisers put ads ahead of the episode and at the end, and they want to know, well, is anyone hearing my sales pitch? Not my sales pitch, the advertiser sales pitch. So, but I do appreciate everybody for listening to these. I hope 2020 has started off beneficial for you. Hope everything's going great. It has been I'm sitting here on January 30th, and it feels like we're already 3 or 4 months in, and we're only 30 days in. But I hope everybody's had a great 2020 so far. It is going to be an exciting year. We've got a lot happening here in Florida. With the legislature still has about another month and a half to go. And of course, I believe we will have a presidential race and impeachment still going on in D.C. So there's just so much going on right now. So a lot to talk about, a lot to do. Have some other guests lined up for later this week, maybe next week. And we'll see about getting that into the feed. Anyway, I appreciate everybody for the downloads. Appreciate everybody who's reached out. If you want to get in touch with me, the Twitter, @CHeathWFTV, or you can email me, Christopher.Heath@WFTV. I'm also working with Joe Kelly over at the radio station, WDBO, towards starting maybe a joint podcast with him, or maybe having him come on once a week on this, and just he and I, do the great hackery of going over the news of the day. And so we'll see what comes of that. Stay tuned for that, and I'll let you know what's happening there. And but we got a lot happening. So anyway, as I said, I hope 2020 is going great for you. I will be back in your feed before you know it. And thank you so much for listening to this. I'll talk to you again.